Mr. Van Bynen. Mr. Van Bynen, please go ahead, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to today's witnesses for sharing their experiences with us. I'm grateful for the opportunity to welcome Blue Door to this committee and to have their local perspective contribute to our studies. So I'll be focusing my questions to Mr. Braithwaite. At the last committee meeting, we started talking about homelessness in Canada, particularly during the pandemic. Blue Door has provided life-saving support and shelter for the vulnerable communities in the York region for many years. And Michael, I congratulate you on the way that you've been able to engage members of the regional government, convincing the police chief to sleep in cardboard boxes in the middle of the night. And that kind of creativity has created a lot of community support. But based on your experience over the last year, can you elaborate on the impact and the risk that the homelessness groups have been experiencing, particularly with respect to a reluctance to seek out help out of fear of transmission? How were you able to cope with that?
Thank you, and it's so nice to see you, Tony. There's a lack of trust for people experiencing homelessness. There's not a lot of trust with systems to begin with, right? You'll see that with some vaccine hesitancy as well. There's a lot of fear in going into crowded spaces, and unfortunately with emergency housing, emergency shelter, they're quite crowded sometimes. There's room sharing, there's spaces where they get together, where they eat, etc. And during the pandemic, of course, we, in order to stay safe, we actually had to have people eat in their rooms, which was social isolation, and we had fewer units. Social isolation to a lot of people is they'd rather stay outside than be isolated for 2 weeks. We also had a system where you'd have to go, a transitional system, and it was all for safety. It made sense, where you'd have to go and isolate for 14 days, which was really, really tough, especially when you have you might have addictions or mental health challenges. So you might have to have an alcohol withdrawal program or a drug withdrawal program that you're working through. You might not have access to that if you're isolated. So it really opened up a lot of different challenges for people going in. For youth, there's a reason we have youth, seniors, women's, and other types of emergency housing separated. For youth to all have to actually isolate with adults and families and others, they just weren't doing it. So youth weren't going inside. They were, and it wasn't a choice. They were just saying, we're going to stay outside if that's the only possibility that we do have. We did not end youth homelessness, but we saw, I think it was 17% of youth accessing our transitional housing program to keep them safe. And so the isolation piece is tough. There's a lack of trust, and there's a lot of fear within. And so what we have to do is really be innovative and creative, as we did with a vacant home with Parks Canada, which has 44 vacant homes, and Rouge Valley Park in York region, that we can take those homes, make affordable housing for many, many years beyond this. We have to work with, we did a 200 Doors campaign where 10 organizations came together to work with landlords to see if we can access new rental properties. Not looking for a break on rent, but just really being open to renting to vulnerable people. So we really need to be creative in how we do that. It continues to be a challenge, but it's going to take innovation and creativity. And it also, we worked with a lot of people to prevent them from losing the housing they have now. So getting them through the region, the rent supports they need so they don't lose their housing, and we don't have new people coming into homelessness.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know that you run 3 programs: Leader Place, Porter Place, and the youth shelter. Now, could you elaborate on those 3 programs and how you might have had to change the provision of services specific to those programs, or was it general? And how have each of these groups been impacted by the pandemic?
Sure. Well, we run our youth emergency housing, Kevin's Place, which is in Newmarket. It's in a house, and we actually couldn't at first run that safely because they were shared accommodations. There was all shared common spaces. So we actually had to move the youth in with men at Porter Place, our men's emergency housing program, which was not ideal. There's a reason we separate. They have different needs. So that one was shut down for a while. It's now back operating, but at a smaller scale. Our families, actually, we worked with the region. We used our family site as the isolation site for the entire region. So for the 9 municipalities that serve as isolation site, our families moved to a hotel for about 8 months or so, and then we moved them back to the site. We've had to cut down a little bit to allow for spacing there, and they can't use the common rooms, and the kids can't play together, which is tough. So that's been fairly tough. And with our men, what's happened too is that everyone in York Region goes through a transitional site first for 14 days, and then usually they would just enter into whichever site made sense for them. Now they go through the transitional site. So the clients we're actually seeing in all of our programs are the hardest to house, because the easier people to house that might need a little income support or just help finding a home that happens the first 14 days transitional site. So what Blue Door and others are seeing when they see those clients are what we call high acuity, people with higher needs, larger families, people that are not employed, people that have more severe addictions, mental health challenges, so they're harder to house. So the number of people we're housing, and especially it's hard to see places too, because they're only doing virtual open houses, if at all. So it's become quite a challenge to get these individuals and families housed.
Thank you. You're doing a great job, Michael, and I appreciate the way you're working in our community.
Thank you.